Patients here.
Oh boy, got some blood going.
Yeah, this is never blood.
Oh, he's wearing it too.
Welcome to the bed. When you get over to the bed, we'll go ahead and give you the story. This is all going to happen super fast. Welcome to the emergency room.
70-year-old female, single driver of a vehicle, appears that she went off-road into a ditch, rolled over her car into a tree, caved in, the top of the vehicle was caved in, so she was hanging out partially from the window. She's been in emergency
in your left hand.
for 45 minutes of CPR.
We can stop CPR with 600.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wading into waters that, let's be honest, terrify a lot of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, a significant portion of the parents listening right now are probably nodding their heads.
So absolutely. But it's not just parents, it's nursing students, too. We're looking at that specific window from, roughly 11 to 20 years old. Adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And in clinical settings, this demographic often gets a bad rap. They're seen as difficult, moody, non-compliant.
Or just impossible to get a straight answer from.
Exactly.
It's such a huge shift. You know, you spend a rotation in pediatrics dealing with toddlers who are excited to show you their toys, or even school-age kids who, for the most part, still see adults as authority figures to be pleased.
Right.
And then suddenly you walk into a room and you're facing a 15-year-old who is just silent or rolling their eyes or actively challenging everything you say. It can feel like walking through a minefield.
It really, really does. But looking at the stack of sources for today, we've pulled the core textbook chapters on growth and development, the new 2025 CDC immunization schedules, and the current pain assessment protocols. It seems like the secret to navigating this, especially for the NCLAX or pediatric boards, isn't just memorizing a list of hormones.
Oh, absolutely not. If you try to memorize every physiological change in isolation, you're just going to drown in data. You'll never get a handle on it.
So what's the approach?
We need to apply the 80-20 rule here.
The 80-20 rule.
Yeah, focus on the 20% of developmental concepts that explain 80% of the clinical problems. The whole mission of this deep dive is to understand the core engine that's driving the adolescent.
Okay.
Because if you understand that engine, you can predict the behavior, you can predict the safety risks, and you can predict the correct answers on the exam.
So what is that engine? What's the core concept?
It's a collision, a high-speed collision between a rapidly maturing, basically adult-sized body and a brain that is desperate for identity but lacks the brakes to keep it safe.
So like a hardware versus software problem?
That's the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The hardware gets a massive upgrade, but the software is still buggy.
I like that framework. So what we're doing here is building a kind of survival guide. We want to move the listener from just asking, what is the normal blood pressure, to how do I actually get this person to listen to me so I can keep them alive?
That's it. That is the ultimate goal.
All right, let's dive in. Let's start with the big picture theme. The outline here calls this the central conflict. We're transitioning from childhood to adulthood, but what's the fundamental shift that's actually happening?
Okay, so think back to the school-age child we talked about before. For a 10-year-old who is the center of their universe, who holds all the truth.
The parents, maybe teacher. It's the adults. Adults are the authority.
Right. In adolescence, that center of gravity shifts violently. The biological and psychological imperative is independence. They're moving from a solar system where parents are the sun to a new one where peers are the sun.
Is that just them being difficult, or is this something that's hardwired?
It's developmental survival. It has to happen. They have to detach to become functioning adults.
Yeah.
But this is where that hardware-software analogy really kicks in and explains the chaos.
Okay, break that down for me. The body is the hardware.
Exactly. Puberty hits, and the hardware gets this massive, incredible upgrade. They get bigger, stronger, faster. They start to look like adults in the mirror.
But the software.
But the software, the brain, and specifically the judgment centers in the prefrontal cortex, is still running an older operating system. It's buggy. It's not fully compatible with the new horsepower of the body.
That totally explains the disconnect. It explains why a kid who can solve a complex calculus problem in class, which is, super high-level cognitive processing,
Right.
will get in a car 5 minutes later and text while driving 80 miles an hour.
Yes. The raw intelligence is there, but the impulse control, the long-term consequence analysis, it's lagging way behind. And that drive for independence, combined with that lag, It explains almost everything, from why they skip breakfast to why they experiment with drugs.
Okay, so let's dig into that hardware upgrade first, the physical stuff. For the exams, I know knowing the timing of puberty is critical, especially telling the difference between males and females.
It's very distinct, and it trips people up all the time. The general rule is females start the process significantly earlier. Biologically, females enter puberty usually around 9 to 10 years old.
And what's the first clinical marker? What are we looking for?
The LRH. That's the medical term for breast budding. That's usually the first sign of ovarian activity.
Okay, the LRH.
Following that, you'll see GnRH pubic hair growth.
Mm-hmm.
But the big milestone everyone focuses on, parents and students alike, is menarche, the first period.
But that's not the start of the process, right? That comes later in the sequence.
Much later. Menarche typically happens about 2 to 2.5 years after breast development begins. So the average age is somewhere around 12 or 12.5.
You know, there's a specific note in the source material about height and menstruation that really stood out. It feels like a classic exam trap.
It is the #1 misconception. I hear it all the time. Parents think, oh, she got her period, she's finally growing up, she's going to shoot up like a beanstalk.
But it's the opposite.
It's the exact opposite signal. Menarche signals the end phase of the growth spurt.
So once the period starts, the growing is almost done.
Their linear growth.
Mm-hmm.
So their height, it slows down dramatically.
Yeah.
They typically stop growing about 2 to 2.5 years after menarche starts. They might only gain another inch or two.
Yeah.
That's it.
That is such a crucial piece of anticipatory guidance for a nurse. If you have a 13-year-old patient who just started her period and she's worried she's too short, you have to manage those expectations.
You do. You have to be honest and say, you're not going to grow another 6 inches. Now, contrast that with males. They're the late bloomers.
Right.
They usually start around 10 to 11 years old. And for them, the first sign is testicular enlargement, what we call Tanner stage 2. But their actual height velocity, that big growth spurt, is much later.
How much later are we talking?
It could be anywhere from 10.5 to 16. It's a much wider window. And because they start their growth spurt later, and they grow for a longer period before their growth plates close, they tend to end up taller.
And speaking of growth plates, the epiphyses, that's the physical mechanism here, right?
Yes, that's what's happening. The surge in sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone that drives all these changes eventually signals those plates at the ends of the long bones to fuse. And once they close, the game is over.
That's your adult height.
That's your adult height. No more growing.
And along with the height, we see these massive changes in their organs. The heart and lungs especially.
The heart's size and strength basically double during adolescence. The lungs increase in diameter and length. This is why you see athletic performance just skyrocket in late adolescence.
So you've got maximum endurance.
Maximum endurance, and coordination is finally dialing in after that awkward sort of puppy dog phase where their limbs are all over the place.
Which leads us directly to vital signs. Because their hearts are bigger and stronger, they don't need to beat as fast as a toddler's heart does.
Exactly. For a nurse, an adolescent is effectively an adult when it comes to vitals. You were looking for a heart rate between 50 and 100 beats per minute. Respirations, 16 to 20. Blood pressure should be systolic under 120, diastolic under 80.
So if you see a resting heart rate of 110 in a 16-year-old, you don't just document normal for age.
No, that is tachycardia. You need to investigate that.
What about pain assessment? Are we still pulling out the smiley faces scale?
Please, please do not use the FACES scale on a cognitively intact 17-year-old. It can feel really demeaning, and they are so sensitive to being treated like children.
So what do we use?
They can think abstractly now. They can quantify their pain, use the numeric scale, 0 to 10. It's simple, it's respectful.
Unless, of course, they're non-communicating or have a cognitive delay.
In that specific case, you would revert back to an observational tool like FLACC. But for your standard adolescent, you just ask them to rate it.
Okay, so that covers the can-do. They can run fast, they have adult vitals, they can articulate pain. But now let's talk about the trap. What can they not do yet?
This is the neurological piece.
Yeah.
This is the software problem. We mentioned the myelin sheath is growing. That's the insulation on the nerves that makes processing faster. So they think really fast. Mm-hmm. But the prefrontal cortex is the bottleneck.
CEO of the
CEO of the brain.
Exactly.
The part that handles judgment, impulse control, and long-term consequence analysis. It is not fully mature until the mid-20s.
So they have a Ferrari engine, the body and bicycle breaks the brain.
That is the perfect description. They literally cannot fully grasp the concept of, if I do this risky thing today, I might be paralyzed in 20 years. It's too abstract. They physically look like adults, which tricks us, the adults, into treating them like adults, but they lack the executive function to act like adults in high-stress, high-emotion situations.
Which transitions us perfectly into how they think. We have to bring in Piaget.
Piaget helps us understand the software itself. Adolescents are entering what he called the stage of formal operations.
This is the big shift from concrete to abstract thinking.
Yes. A younger, school-aged child thinks in very concrete terms. The stove is hot, don't touch it. An adolescent can think abstractly. What is the nature of heat? What are the principles of thermodynamics? What if I modify the stove? They can think about the future, about hypotheticals, about what-if scenarios. They can scientifically problem solve.
But, and this is a big but, there's a glitch in the software.
A massive glitch. It's called adolescent egocentrism. Even though they have these new abstract thinking powers, they are hyper-focused on themselves. And this shows up in two very specific ways that are all over nursing exams: the imaginary audience and the personal fable.
Okay, let's break those down. The imaginary audience.
Yeah.
Is this the feeling that everyone is constantly looking at you?
Yes. The teen walks into the school cafeteria and genuinely believes that every single person is looking at them, scrutinizing their hair, their shoes, the pimple on their forehead. This is what leads to that agonizing self-consciousness.
It's main character syndrome.
It really is. They feel like they are on stage 24/7 and the spotlight is always on them.
And the second one, the personal fable. This one sounds more dangerous.
Oh, it's deeply dangerous. The personal fable is the core belief that one's own thoughts, feelings, and experiences are completely unique and special.
Like no one has ever felt love like this before.
Or no one could possibly understand my pain. But the really dark side of it is the belief in invincibility. Bad things happen to other people. Other people get pregnant. Other people die in car crashes. Not me. I'm special. I'm different.
Wow, that is a terrifying combination.
Yeah.
You have a brain that is actively seeking sensation and novelty, and a belief system that tells you, I cannot be hurt.
And then you layer Erickson on top of that.
Okay, Erickson's stage for this age group. Identity versus role confusion.
Right. The primary #1 developmental job of the teenager is to answer the question, who am I? Not who my parents say I am, not who my teachers think I am, but who I am, separate from the family unit.
And to do that, they need a mirror.
The peer group acts as that mirror. That's its function. They try on different identities, the goth kid, the jock, the theater kid, and they look to their peers to see if it fits, to get that reflection.
So fitting in isn't just about being popular.
No, it's not shallow. It is a developmental survival mechanism. They need it to build their identity.
So let me see if I can connect these dots. Because they are seeking identity, which is Erickson's task,
Right.
they rely heavily on their peers. And because they have the personal fable from Piaget,
Yeah, the invincibility.
they will take massive risks to impress those peers because they genuinely believe they won't get hurt.
You've just summarized the entire adolescent safety profile. That's the engine. That connection is everything.
And it connects to why play changes so much, too. As nurses, we're not asking about Legos or dolls anymore.
No, not at all. Play evolves into socialization. It's hanging out at the mall, it's group chats, it's structured activities like sports or clubs. The purpose of play now is to learn negotiation, hierarchy, and social roles outside of the family.
And sports are a huge part of this for a lot of teens.
Huge participation, and for the most part, it's very good. It's great for physical health, self-esteem, social acceptance. But again, that hardware-software issue comes right back up.
How so?
Overuse injuries are incredibly common because they push too hard, they don't listen to their bodies, and concussions are a major, major concern, especially with that invincible mindset.
And then there's the digital playground. Screen time.
Well, the sources say 95% of teens have access to a smartphone. It's a classic double-edged sword. It connects them to their peers, which is good for building identity. But it also exposes them to cyberbullying, social comparison, unrealistic body standards, all of which could be terrible for identity.
So as a nurse, when you're doing an assessment and you ask about activities, you aren't really asking about hobbies in the traditional sense.
Not really. You're asking, who do you hang out with and what are you doing online? You are assessing their entire social ecosystem because that's where the real developmental work and the real risk is happening.
Okay, let's move to those risks. Section 5. Because of everything we just talked about, the invincibility, the peer pressure, the underdeveloped judgment adolescence is a surprisingly dangerous time.
It is. The mortality rate actually goes up from childhood.
Yeah.
And we talk about the big 3 killers for this age group.
Number 1 is always unintentional injury, and specifically motor vehicle crashes, MVCs.
Far and away the leader. And just think about the why. You have a brand new driver, so there's inexperience. You add a car full of friends, which is pure distraction, and you top it off with the personal fable.
I won't crash.
I can handle this. I'm a good driver. It's a recipe for disaster.
I saw a stat in the source material that said the risk of a fatal crash doubles with every teen passenger in the car.
It does. It's not a linear increase. It's an exponential distraction. That's precisely why so many states now have graduated licensing laws that limit the number of teen passengers a new driver can have. It's a direct legislative response to this developmental reality.
Okay, so after car crashes, we have suicide and homicide.
Yeah. Suicide is either the second or third leading cause of death, depending on the specific year's data, but it is a massive crisis. And the impulsivity of the adolescent brain is absolutely key here.
Because a problem feels permanent.
It feels permanent and totally unique. A breakup can feel like the absolute end of the world because of the personal fable. No one has ever felt pain like this. If they have access to a lethal means like a firearm, in that moment of high emotion and impulsivity, tragedy happens.
The sources specifically call out the increased risk for the LGBTQ+ population?
Yes, social marginalization, bullying, family rejection.
Yeah.
These things significantly increase that risk. And homicide, unfortunately, is also right there in the top 3, often involving firearms and gang-related violence.
And then we have substance abuse. The sources mention vaping as the new gateway.
Vaping and smoking are huge. The stat is that 9 out of 10 adult smokers started before they were 18. If you can get a kid to age 20 without smoking, they probably never will.
And the brain itself is more vulnerable.
The developing brain is primed for addiction. It learns faster than an adult brain, which is great for school, but it also means it learns addiction faster too.
So, anticipatory guidance. This is what the nurse needs to tell the parents and the team. It has to be specific and practical.
It has to be. For cars, seatbelts are non-negotiable. No texting and driving, period. Limit night driving. Limit passengers. For firearms, they have to be removed from the home or at the very least locked in a safe with the ammunition locked separately. A depressed, impulsive teen cannot have easy access to a gun.
And what about water safety? I feel like that's more of a toddler issue.
You'd think so, but drowning's still a real risk. Not because they can't swim, but because they do things like swim drunk or dive into shallow water on a dare to show off for their friends.
It's the hold my beer and watch this phenomenon.
That is the personal fable in action, 100%.
Let's shift gears a bit to maintenance. Health promotion. Section 6. The body is growing so fast, it must need a ton of fuel.
The caloric needs are sky high. During that peak growth spurt, an adolescent boy might need 2,800 calories or even more just to maintain their weight.
Wow. And are there any specific nutrients we need to be focused on?
2 big ones, calcium and iron. Calcium because almost half, 45% of your total adult skeletal mass is built during adolescence. If you don't bank that bone density now, you are setting yourself up for osteoporosis later in life.
Okay, calcium and iron.
Iron is crucial.
Yeah.
For males, it's for the massive expansion in muscle mass and blood volume. For females, it's to replace the losses from menstruation. Iron deficiency anemia is really common.
But the reality of their diet is fast food.
It is. You've got convenience plus independence. They have their own money, they have cars, they go to the drive-thru with friends. So obesity is a major risk on the other side of the coin.
And sleep. I feel like every parent I know complains their teen is lazy and sleeps all day on the weekends.
They're not lazy. They are biologically jet-lagged. It's real. There is a physiological shift in the circadian rhythm during puberty. Their body clock pushes sleep onset later.
So they're becoming night owls.
They are becoming night owls. They physically cannot fall asleep at 9 p.m. anymore. Their body wants to sleep at 1 a.m. and wake up at 10 a.m.
But school starts at 7:30.
Exactly. So they are chronically, profoundly sleep deprived. They need about 9 hours a night. They're lucky if they get 6. And that affects everything: mood, grades, and especially driving safety.
All right, let's talk about vaccines, the teen platform. We've got a clear checklist here from the 2025 CDC schedule.
Yep, that 11 to 12-year-old visit is the golden hour for adolescent vaccines. There are 3 routine shots you absolutely need to know for your exams.
Let's list them.
First up is Tdap. This is the booster for tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis whooping cough.
Okay, Tdap.
Second is meningococcal, specifically the Meningococcal WY vaccine. This protects against bacterial meningitis, which spreads really fast in crowds. Think college dorms or army barracks.
Got it. And the third one?
HPV, human papillomavirus.
Now, this one can get some pushback from parents because it's associated with a sexually transmitted virus. How do you frame that conversation?
You frame it accurately as cancer prevention. That is the medical reality. This vaccine prevents cervical cancer, throat cancer, anal cancers. It's a cancer vaccine.
And there's a scheduling nuance there, right? Based on age.
Yes, and this is a key detail for the listener. If they start the series before age 15, they only need 2 doses. If they start after 15, they need 3. So starting at 11 actually saves them a shot.
What about for the older teens, say 16 to 18?
At 16, they get a booster dose of that MenND-WY vaccine. But you also start talking about MenB meningococcal B. It's a separate type. It's usually what we call shared clinical decision-making, which means you discuss the risks and benefits with the family. But it's often given between 16 and 23, especially for kids heading off to college, and of course the annual flu shot for everyone.
Okay, we've covered the body, the brain, the risks, the maintenance. Let's get to Section 7. This is for the nursing students who are sweating over the NCLEX. How do we apply all this knowledge?
You have to think like an exam writer. And what they are really testing, more often than not, is your understanding of privacy and communication.
Give me the classic scenario. You walk into the exam room, there's a 16-year-old and their mom. The teen looks nervous and isn't talking. What do you do?
The answer on an exam is almost always going to be something like, ask the parent to step out for part of the visit. You cannot get an honest history about sex, drugs, depression, or safety risks with a parent hovering over them.
But how do you do that without offending the parent?
You frame it as a standard of care. You say something like, it's our policy to spend a little time with all our teen patients alone, just to help them start taking ownership of their own health. You make it normal.
And what about confidentiality? This is so tricky. The teen asks, you won't tell my mom what I say, right?
You have to be honest, but you also have to build trust. The right answer is to say, what we discuss here is private. I will not share it with your parents unless you tell me that you are going to hurt yourself, that someone else is hurting you, or that you are planning to hurt someone else.
The harm exception.
Right. Suicide, homicide, and abuse are mandatory reporting situations. You have to be clear about that boundary. But if they tell you they're sexually active or they tried alcohol at a party, you generally keep that private to maintain trust, while of course counseling them on safety.
So if an exam question says a 15-year-old asks for information on birth control, and the options are call the parents immediately, lecture them on abstinence, or provide the information.
The answer is always provide the information. Do not lecture them. They will tune you out instantly. And do not break their trust by calling the parent immediately. The nursing boards will always favor patient advocacy and building a trusting therapeutic relationship.
And watch out for distractors that use the wrong tools, like an option to use the FLACC scale on a teenager.
That's an immediate wrong answer. You have to treat them as a partner in their care, not as a child.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground. Let's try to bring it all home with our 80-20 summary box. If the listener remembers nothing else from this entire deep dive, what is the one thing?
Remember the collision. The adolescent is a physically adult body driven by a pure-focused heart and an invincible mind. If you get that, you get almost everything else.
And we have a mnemonic for this,
Yeah.
SAFE.
SAFE teens.
Yep.
S is for sexuality and socialization. Everything is peer-driven.
Okay.
A is for accidents, specifically MVCs. They are the #1 killer because of that invincibility. F is for future thinking. They have formal operations, but it's flawed by that egocentrism we talked about.
Right, the personal fable.
And E is for eating and exercise. High calories, iron, calcium, and the overuse injuries that can come with sports.
SAFE. I love it. It's about pattern recognition, really. So if the exam question involves safety,
You should immediately think invincibility, car crashes, risk-taking.
if the question involves communication,
Think privacy and identity, talk to them alone.
and if the question is about growth,
Think sexual maturation. And remember that key fact, menarche, the first period, signals the end of the major growth spurt, not the beginning.
that's amazing. You know, before we sign off, I was thinking about that personal fable concept, the idea that I am unique and bad things won't happen to me.
It sticks with you, doesn't it?
It really strikes me that this doesn't fully disappear when we turn 20. I look at nursing students or new grads working 12-hour shifts, not eating, not sleeping, and thinking, I won't burn out. Burnout happens to other people.
That is a profound connection. That's exactly right. We all carry a little bit of that adolescent invincibility with us. It can be a protective mechanism, but it can also be a major blinder.
So, to our listener, the next time you're dealing with that difficult teen patient, try to see them a little differently. Don't just see a rebel. See a person who is trying to figure out who they are, piloting a Ferrari with bicycle brakes, and just hoping to stay on the road.
Well said.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Stay curious.